not enough to be progressive on 90% of the issues. It's that 10% of the issues that determines whether somebody has been illegally evicted from the neighborhood that they grew up in. It determines whether or not a council member sides with rezoning their neighborhood. It determines whether or not these oligarchs who are buying up our apartments around the city are paying taxes or not. Why is it we're able to give them tax breaks, but we don't have the money to build affordable housing? We are in crisis. We need to take this seriously. And as public advocate, I am not only not taking any form of developer money, whether through loopholes or not, but I am taking them on directly, investigating them, and I'm investigating city agencies, or like the MTA, where we have a real estate developer sitting on the MTA, or NYCHA that's having closed-door meetings because they're owned by developers. We have to start understanding that these two work hand in hand. The developers in the city are making our city inequitable, and they're driving out all from middle class, higher middle class, to low income in this city, making it completely unaffordable.
Hey everyone, I'm here with Nomiki Konst. You all know who she is. She's running for public advocate in New York City. Nomiki, thank you so much for joining the program.
Thank you, Mike. I'm so grateful that you guys are paying attention to this very, very not a lot of people know about the public advocate's office, let alone this race that's on February 26th. So I'm just so grateful that you're giving it attention.
Absolutely. And in fact, do you want to explain to us what this race is all about and what you could do as public advocate?
Sure. So the public advocate is second in line to the mayor of New York City. New York City is the largest city in the country. We produce more wealth than anywhere else on the planet, but we have the worst income inequality than anywhere else in the country at the worst moment in history. So this office, while it is second to the mayor, it's supposed to be the watchdog of the city. It's supposed to hold all of New York City agencies and government and lawmakers accountable. It's supposed to hold special interests accountable. That was the intent of the office when it was set up about 25 years ago. In my opinion, I don't think it's ever been, it's ever had the strength that it's supposed to. I think the office's investigative powers have been limited, but you know, for a moment like this, where the city is so unaffordable, I think it's important that the office actually does represent the people and actually is taking on these big interests. And that's actually why I'm running. This is a position that's supposed to be investigative. It's supposed to be a position that's advocating for progress and representing all New Yorkers. But more importantly, I am actually willing to take on the developers of the city. And that is at the root of the crisis in New York. We have a real estate development class that has been, deregulated, not paying taxes, has sucked the city dry of literally hundreds of trillions of dollars over the last 40 years. And it's time that the public advocate be willing to separate himself or herself from politics and from this industry and take them on head on.
Right. And going over your platform, it's incredibly ambitious, and it's, I think, what's needed. So, for example, you are proposing a $30 minimum wage. Now, people across the country, they might scoff at that, the usual people who aren't even on board with 15. But can you explain why that's actually really necessary?
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is New York City. It costs $6 to get a cup of coffee. I have a cup of coffee here right now. And it's not because our coffee beans are better, and it's not because the coffee shops are fancier. It really has to do with rent. The city the rent costs are astronomically high. People are being priced out of their own neighborhoods. They're being illegally evicted. Council members are rezoning communities, and small businesses are shutting down, not just because of companies like Amazon before they came to Queens, but because these developers have been holding properties hostage and then jacking up rent prices so that small businesses, restaurants, coffee shops are really struggling to get by, and they put the costs on us. And so their number one concern is, they can't afford to pay their workers a higher wage. And I get that. I really do, because they're being crushed by higher rents. So what we're doing with this $30 minimum wage is we're saying businesses with over 75 employees, so usually get big tax breaks, many of them, not all of them, and the municipal government, they can afford to pay $30 an hour. $30 an hour is still not enough to pay for a one-bedroom apartment in New York City. There are countless, seriously, you can just Google it. Go online and Google $15 an hour, pay for one-bedroom apartment, and see all the different news stories that come up about how $15 an hour is not enough for any family across the United States to pay for a one-bedroom apartment. It sure as heck, it was great progress. It was a huge fight. But unfortunately in New York, the $15 an hour wage only applies to New York City, and it was just enacted. It's not reflected with inflation. It took many years to get to this point, and it's really a poverty wage. So we need to take it up a notch. We need to start the conversation at $30 an hour. And just to add to that, a lot of the pushback I get is from conservatives or folks who really maybe aren't familiar with the economic situation. And they say, oh, well, it's supposed to be for, low-wage workers, kids out of school, and people working at fast food restaurants. Yes, but most people who are working at fast food restaurants are single mothers. Mm-hmm. Most people who are low-wage workers, as they like to say, are working people who are working several jobs. This is the economy that we live in today. It is not high schoolers. It is people who are just trying to survive in a city that is just jacking up the prices at every single take they can, whether it's the MTA or whether it's your apartment costs or just your cup of coffee or childcare. It is very, very hard to live in this city because it is so expensive and wages are historically low. So we need a $30 minimum wage, and we need to take on these developers who are making it so unaffordable to live here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that makes sense. If you know about, the cost of living there, then it's not as far-fetched as people like to make it seem. Now, I wanted to, because there's a lot of issues that you've been touching on throughout the course of this race. Can you talk about what would be a couple of priorities for you just within the first year? Because there's a lot for you to do. You're going to have your hands full. So what do you think you would try to take on first?
Yeah, so the first thing that I would announce on day one is I think that the public advocate should not be in succession to the mayor. I think it needs to be a truly independent office, an office that is not influenced by politics, that is not a stepping stone for people who are termed out in the city council or who don't want to go to Albany anymore. Right now we're in a race that is pretty much narrowed down to 10 people, 10 or so. Those are who are going to be on the debate stage. We are the only campaign on that stage who does not take money from real estate developers, has never in the past, never will in the future, corporate money, lobbyist money, PAC money, and we don't use loopholes. And the loopholes are something that I want to take on day one. We have a city campaign finance system in our city, which is a step in the right direction. But one thing I'm learning through this process is that in order to receive the matching funds the city offers, for every $1 that I raise, it could be matched with $8 from the city, anywhere from $10 to $250. But what that does is it actually mobilizes these mega donors to call up all their friends and family and give $250. Most average folks can't give $250. Our average contribution is the lowest by far in the race at around, our numbers say it's around 40. The CFB says 70, and that's because they don't count anything below $10. So when you factor in contributions below $10, it's much lower. So, they won't give you the money until you raise $62,500. And the deadline is next week. And we are about $10,000 away from the deadline, from the goal, from the threshold. But, it really is biased towards folks who say they come from a law firm, and the law firm, you're a partner. All you have to do is call up all the lawyers of the law firm, and if it's a big law firm, they'll give their $250, and then you're done, just like that. That's public financing. Or, they say that they're not taking corporate money, but they're taking the CEO's money, and they're taking the CEO's wife or husband's money, and their kids' money, and their sisters and brothers, and it just becomes this scheme. So I think the second thing I would take on day one is this campaign finance system and really make it a true public finance system. And somebody needs to advocate for that and understand these tricks. It won't be popular with a lot of these bought politicians, but I do think that there are a lot of folks who would be on our side. So the third thing, other than pushing for a $30 minimum wage and taking on the real estate industry, which is a more long-term plan, this office is way too bureaucratic. It is supposed to be the office that New Yorkers go to when the city does not respond to their needs. You look at NYC, which is the public housing in New York City. It is the largest landlord in the country, and it is the worst landlord in the country. There's a rat infestation. There's no hot water, no heat often. There is a very famous lead paint crisis, and it's owed $32 billion. It will soon be, in a couple of years, $40 billion. And now HUD is saying that they want to partly take over NYCHA and privatize it. But that's the scheme. The scheme in New York and across the world really is suck cities dry by not taxing the wealthy, by not taxing the developers in this city. And then they either privatize institutions and public entities while they simultaneously jack up the costs on working people. And so one thing that I will be doing on day one is decentralizing this office, calling for a public advocate in every single city council district to make sure that if you're from East New York, or you're from Staten Island, or you're from East Harlem, you have somebody from your neighborhood that you trust to go to that is independent and is trained to investigate, so that if NYCHA is not delivering you the hot water and heat, it doesn't get jammed up in a bureaucracy. It's dealt with right there in your neighborhood. And then if it's not taken care of, it goes to obviously the larger office. But we have to start investing entities at the local level so that they don't become these bureaucratic nightmares. And that's not a left or right issue. Bureaucracy is a problem. And we find out that the MTA is using signals from 100 years ago, and NYCHA is having closed door meetings. I mean, this is what happens when you don't have a public advocate's office that is truly independent and investigative. And so I'm hoping to bring that to the office.
We're going to get to what people can do to help you out. But before we do that, I wanted to touch on something just real quick here. So the governor of New York, Amazon Cuomo, as he calls himself, courted Amazon. What is your take on this? Is there anything you can do in this situation where it's basically, a corporate, I don't even know what to call it at this point. It's shameless corporatization, of the state to get the headquarters in New York City. So what is your take on this situation? And is there anything that you could or would do?
Yeah, so this is becoming it's been a hot issue, but it's in this election, it's becoming a hot issue because there are several candidates in this race who I'm running against who may say they're progressive on issues, but they signed a letter not saying, oh, we'll look into Amazon. No, they signed a letter that said in the first line, we as a united elected body urge Amazon to invest in New York City. Now, I live in Queens. I actually live very close to where the Amazon headquarters is going to be set up. Technically, I'm in Long Island City right now as we speak. So, we feel this very, very closely in our neighborhood. It's very hot. But when you go to Long Island City, this is not just about giving a ginormous tax break to the world's wealthiest man, a helicopter pad to the world's wealthiest man, or inviting. I mean, listen, before this letter, a lot of elected officials say, oh, well, the deal was happening behind closed doors, and so that's why we're against it now. No. We knew what Amazon was. It's not like Amazon was invented a year ago. We knew when Amazon began. We knew the effects of Amazon by looking at Seattle and the homeless crisis that's in Seattle. Or you could go to Austin and see how the city council is suing Amazon now to get their incentives back because they didn't follow through on their deal. And what we've learned as of yesterday is that Amazon is not even going to bring unions to the table as they agreed. So I think it's time that the governor and the mayor of New York pull out of this deal. They are not honest brokers. What we've also seen that no other candidate wants to touch is that this was a real estate deal. Before they even started having negotiations, there were developers who knew, it's like insider trading, right? Mm-hmm. They knew that this deal was going to happen. And so they started building high rises and selling the apartments to Amazon employees. Now, if a public advocate was really paying attention to what was happening, they would see that, there's 100 Amazon employees that just bought up apartments around this empty site. I wonder what's going to happen there. This is what it means to be an investigative reporter. You see those things, you're trained to look that way and to stop it before it becomes a crisis, to raise red flags, to pay attention to those red flags, because what we know is going to happen to Long Island City is not just that there's these huge tax breaks that are sucking the city dry, but the redevelopment of that neighborhood came with rezoning that was caused, there was a council member who was very much part of that process who's now against Amazon. But, you cannot criticize the Amazon deal if you do not talk about the rezoning of that neighborhood, which is hurting working people. It's hurting immigrants. And that is the fabric of this city. And if you don't have working people affording to live in New York, you really don't have a New York City anymore. You have a Dubai.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's really interesting because, yeah, you're right. You are an investigative reporter. You're the one who revealed a lot of the, the corruption in the DNC with the consultants and whatnot. So you kind of have this sense to sniff out this type of corruption and all of these wrongdoings and, really the corporate takeover of your city, but it's also happening elsewhere, as you kind of alluded to. So, I mean, I think that you've pretty much convinced me and everyone who's watching this, because we all know and love you. So I want you to just kind of explain what we can do, because not everyone who's watching is going to live in New York City. So for outsiders, what can we do to help you? I know that donations are important. If we live in New York City, what can we do to help you? Just basically, how can we get you elected?
I hate to make it about money. I really hate to make it about money.
Yeah.
But, we have a matching funds deadline. It is the last deadline. So we have the system where every dollar that is raised in New York City, you get another $8 from the city, as long as it's $10 to $250. But the city makes it really strict. You only get access to that money if you raise $62,500. So we have about $10,000 left to raise. If you're in New York and you can afford whatever you can afford, honestly, I mean, we're so grateful. You can go to our website at nomikikonst.com and really anything up to $250. So if you want to give more, tell your friends and family if you live in New York City. Of course, if you would like to contribute, if you don't live in New York City, that still helps us pay our bills. We are running, just to put this into context, we are running against some very, very well-funded, tricky electeds. They have used the system to basically skirt the campaign finance rules. So they could use previous accounts to fund things. They could raise more money. They have a lot of expensive lawyers. Some of them are funded by charter schools. All of them pretty much have taken real estate developer money. We are not being backed by an institution. We actually got on the ballot. In under a week, we collected over 10,000 signatures, and we didn't pay any shady firms. There are these shady, signature firms. They got into petition signatures. We have hardworking people on our campaign. Honest folks are donating, and I know that they're scared because they're starting to attack me. There's 10 people in this race. I am not an elected official. I definitely haven't raised as much money. We haven't raised as much money as many of these people, but they're starting to attack, which means that they're actually scared. So once we hit those matching funds, we'll be able to flex our muscles more and get the message out about this to the whole city. Otherwise, we'll be drowned out by the corporate messaging, and that's why it's just really important right now. Of course, if you want to make phone calls, we'll be setting up a dialogue program in the next week or so. But for now, it's really about hitting those matching funds to keep us viable. And then you can watch me in the debate on February 6th. It's on New York 1, if you're in New York. I don't know if they're streaming it, but I'm sure that we'll be able to package it in some way where you can watch it afterwards.
All right. Well, that sounds perfect. One more time. Can you tell us the website?
Sure. It's NOMIKIKONST.com. There's a contribute button at the top. And, this is a very important race. Not a lot of folks are expecting to turn out. So if you have friends and family in New York, if you are in New York, please spread the word. There are a lot of elected officials in this race who are claiming to be progressive, and they might be on 90% of the issues. But at the end of the day, as long as they've taken real estate developer money, they're in bed with real estate. And that is what determines whether or not someone gets evicted from their home illegally, a neighborhood gets rezoned. If you're not able to take on real estate, you're in bed with real estate, in my opinion.
Yeah.
This is a crisis that is so extreme that I think that if we take it on in New York, it actually will have an effect across the country and maybe even across the globe. So we got to do this. We're just $10,000 away. That's it.
You're close. You're so close.
Very close. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Nomiki, for New York Public Advocate. Thanks for joining the show, and we're all rooting for you here.
Thank you so much for everything and everything you do. You're such a great educator, and I just one compliment. I have so many folks who say, "Oh, you need to go on the Humanist Report. You need to go on the Humanist Report." So I love that we're a family, and everybody, looks out for each other, because that's what it's going to take to be able to fight these well-funded corporate hacks.
Absolutely. And look, I'm on the opposite side of the country. I'm on the Pacific Northwest. But what you do in New York can have an impact elsewhere. Like I always talk about the domino effect. You know, if somebody implements a policy in one state that works out really well, other states could implement it. So it's not just about New York City, in my view. It's about creating this broad coalition of progressives who are taking on, you know, the status quo. And I think that this is what the race is about. So thank you for running. I think that this is really exciting.
Girly Mike Fettuccine needs your support on Patreon. What a loser. Visit patreon.com/Humanist Report to support the low ratings Humanist Report. Sad. My views are much higher.